Hey everybody, so I am going to talk about the track and field event called High Jump today. So what is high jump? High jump is a field event when it comes to track and field, and it's where athletes must jump without assistance over a horizontal bar set at an adjusted height without dislodging the bar or just knocking it off completely. It is most commonly practiced with a thick floor mat beneath the horizontal beam to keep athletes from injury when landing the jump. This picture here is an example of what that mat might look like. And then this here is what the high jump looks like over that bar. We will talk more about the different types of ways to high jump over the bar here later in the presentation. High jump history. The first high jump ever recorded was said to take place in Scotland in the early 19th century. The original approach to the bar was to go diagonally and then hike the first inside leg over, followed in a scissor fashion by the other leg. It wasn't until the early 20th century that they started to modernize more techniques. An Irish American man named Michael Sweeney first created something called the Eastern Cutoff. Not soon after Sweeney created the Eastern Cutoff, another man named George Horan created an even more effective approach known as the Western Roll. I will go over these different approaches a little bit later on in this presentation. The man up in the top corner is Mr. Michael Sweeney, and the younger man in the track uniform down below, that is George Horan. So some high jump rules and regulations. So to start off with the rules, the takeoff must not be done on 2 feet. It has to be done on 1. So the takeoff is whenever they jump to go over the bar. Dislodging the bar will not count as a successful jump. As you know, the whole point of this event is to make it over that bar without dislodging it. The jump height is actually declared by a chief judge. The athletes can either accept what the chief judge sets the height at, or they can pass on it. If an athlete competing fails all 3 consecutive attempts, he or she is disqualified. During a final challenge, so if there's down to 2 people who just keep one-upping each other, whoever gets that final highest height completed successfully wins. If there's a tie, either players with the least amount of misses wins, or the player with the fewest errors in the overall tournament wins. Regulations. Measurements of the height are taken from the middle of the horizontal bar down to the ground. It should also be measured from those outside points of the bar where the vertical bars meet, and this should always be done, measuring the end heights whenever the bar is raised, or if someone is attempting a new record, just to make sure that record doesn't have any faults. Recording jumps and safety. So when jumps are recorded, they're done on a record sheet, and a negative sign means the athlete passed on that height or didn't attempt the height at all. The X means that it was a failed attempt at that height, and a circle or a 0 or an O, whichever you want to call it, means the athlete was successful with the attempt. Now, some safety issues with high jump required by the LAANSW, the landing pad must be this certain area in length, width, and height. Clearing the middle of the bar is a big thing and not the edges, because you could run into those vertical bars and that could lead to a big disaster. Use a bungee bar or a flex bar when you have a new learner for the high jump, just so whenever if they end up hitting that bar more than once, it's not going to hurt them as bad, and it also gives them a little room to fail and get back up and try it again. The safety straps could also be used. These are things that go on the back of that horizontal and vertical bar to keep the bar from falling backwards on the athlete if it becomes dislodged on the mat. So some tips and tricks for coach. Use greater increments for height raises when conducting for larger groups. If you go up in smaller increments, that's going to make this event last a lot longer than you probably want it to when you have an event or a track meet to manage. Have each athlete that's there nominate only 3 heights that they say they will be recording. Again, if you have people doing more than 3, that event might take longer than you want it to. With a larger group, you can consider the way you split them up or organize the event. So you could do it by scissor jumpers and flop jumpers. I think we talked about this one in class. This next one, have athletes start at a shorter distance with shorter heights. So it should be a 1-to-1 ratio with that. So if they start at 6 feet, then it should be a 6-foot run to that. Have different colored tape even set aside for markers, which I will go over this a little bit later when it comes to drills. If you have different colored tape, that can help each individual athlete mark where they want to start by having their colored tape there for them. The ideal athlete. So I've put ideal in quotation marks because obviously anyone can be a high jumper if they want to be. Now, however, the ideal high jumper would be someone who is taller and more slender if you are a coach searching for more people to be your high jumpers. Now, there will be pros and cons to anybody in any body type that might want to attempt high jump. Some pros for someone who's taller and more slender is their higher center of gravity. If they've got a higher center of gravity, they're going to already be higher up on that bar and they're going to have a better chance at making it over that bar. Now, being more slender, you can usually move faster, which will build up that momentum for them to get over that bar, and it makes it easier for them to manipulate the body in the air and over the horizontal bar. Some cons, they do usually have longer limbs, and it's easier to hit the bar if you don't have the kind of control over your limbs to make it over. Different techniques. So we have Sweeney's Eastern Cutoff. The takeoff is like the scissors approach. You extend the spine and flatten out over the bar. The world record with the Eastern Cutoff was 6 foot 5.5 inches. Here's your example of the Eastern Cutoff. You have the Western Roll by Horan, and the approach to the bar is in a diagonal. The inside leg is used for liftoff, and the outer leg helps thrust the body over the bar sideways. The record was then beat at 6 foot 7 inches. So now we have the straddle jump. The approach to the straddle jump is very similar to the Western roll, but the change in this jump is that they're going to rotate their torso around the bar. That meaning that when they go over the bar, when they jump, they're going to go belly down. The world record was then beat with this straddle approach with 7 foot 5 3/4 inch. Here's an example for your straddle. You can see from 3 to 5 that the torso goes around the bar, meaning that it is bellied down. Next, we have the Fosbury flop. This is the one I told you guys is now most commonly used. It was created by a guy at Oregon State University by the name of Dick Fosbury. Its approach is an updated Eastern cutoff. And with this jump, you go over the bar head first, shoulders down. Now, in this picture here, you can see that they have head first, shoulders down, and their feet are relaxed as they go over the bar. Now, before the Fosbury flop, sawdust was used instead of the tumbling like padding that I showed in the first couple slides. And this is because if you were to land on your neck, your shoulders, your back like that, it is going to cause serious injuries that could be life-threatening. The world record is now held and beat from the straddle at 7 foot 8.5 inches. Okay, so now for some drills on high jump. You can find all kinds of different drills all over the internet. I found drills for the approach, for the takeoff, for the landing, for going over the bar, and even things to break those approaches even down further. So just to put a few on here for you guys, I did some approach drills, and the first one we have on here is the straight start. It's where you run only just the first 5 steps with or without transition of the approach. Now, if it were me and I had a new athlete, I would probably start without the transition, let them get used to the first 5 steps of that approach, and then add on the transition. Your next one is going to be circle runs / skips. This can be done anywhere in any diameter of circle. This is where you would draw a circle. You could use chalk, you could use tape, whichever you might need. And it's just going to emphasize pushing to the outside and single track running of that inside leg before they jump. They can run or skip the circle 2 to 3 times in a row just to get in the swing of it, and it can be done with that takeoff jump as well. The next one would be the straights with circles. This is where the straight start and the circle runs come together. You can have the athletes run in the straight line like they would for the approach, and then run 2 to 3 circles. This is, like I said, a good drill to link the two parts together, and it can be done with the pit or without the pit, which means they would jump from the takeoff. Pit circles. Once the athlete has learned how to run the drills above, you would then have them try this one. Have them start at an arm length away and just inside near the standard. They will run a circle drill and then pop up into the pit, landing on their feet. It may take a couple of attempts to figure out how many steps are needed for them, but once you figure this out, you can mark the far point for the approach with the tape or a marker. You will see that this drill can be set up to closely match the athlete's turn. You can try it with a slower straightaway run, emphasizing the transition to complete a circle and pop up. Okay, so some takeoff drills. This first one is called the 3 and 5 step jump. You're going to have your athlete run back 3 or 5 steps, marking the spot where the step is. The step is where they're going to do their takeoff to get over the bar. This mark will be just inside their normal run for the approach because they're not going to be moving as fast, so it's not as far back as a regular approach would be. You're just wanting to make sure that they take those steps as if they're going around the curve in those circle drills, and they are taking the turn to get their back up and over the bar. Your next drill is called walk-in or jog-in 5 steps. It's the same as the drill above, but you're going to move to the takeoff spot by either walking or jogging it in. So now instead of just taking steps, you're either going to walk or jog, just increasing the speed a little bit. This is good linking to the full approach and less stressful than the full approach jump altogether. So you're just going to have your athlete take 5 steps back, and you're just going to do a little bit faster of a turn with the body. The full approach with scissor kicks, now you're going to start to let them run their full approach and clear the bar, but with an upright scissoring action of their legs, not the Fosbury flop or anything else. You just want them to get used to that takeoff action, because it's definitely not something your body normally is used to. The emphasis again will be on that takeoff step action before the bar clearance. A bungee bar would be great use here because it's probably going to be a new athlete or someone who needs to get down the technique for the takeoff, not necessarily clearing the bar. So with that being said, you would want to set the height a little bit lower to where it's not going to alter their takeoff sequence. It's just going to help them master it. Now, the 2 links below will take you to some YouTube videos that I found very helpful with some drills. They're just 10 to 12 minutes long and just a little too long for me to play both of them in here, so feel free to go check those out. And that's all I've got for you guys. I hope you enjoyed this presentation and learned something new.